our director of programs, and our current director of programs, for some reason insists on working in person again. So Kathy is stepping in for her. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm here to introduce our speaker. Jan Bills is the author of Late Bloomer, a national speaker, certified landscape designer, advanced master gardener, and entrepreneur. After a successful career in corporate world, she made a major life assessment and followed her heart. She started the Detroit area landscape design company, Two Women and a Hoe. Today, Jan is going to talk to us about design for comfort, ease, and simplicity. Gardens should be our love, not our labor of love. Discover how to design gardens which ultimately sustain the garden and the gardener. Basic design principles are used in every stage of gardening, including planting and maintenance. Together, we'll develop a shift in perspective as we explore how to garden with comfort, ease, and simplicity. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to move around a little bit, and then I think that helps with the background noise. So thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited. We have so much to talk about today, and I have a lot of great things to share with you. So let's get started. I first want to tell you a quick little story about Can't Never Could. So back in 2005, my brother, big burly guy, called me on the phone. He said, "I'll be right over. I have something for you." So knowing Michael, I knew it would be good. I waited for him to pull in my driveway in his F-150. He jumped out of the back of the truck, went to the back, got this big boulder. And as a child, he called me Jano. So in the boulder, he inscribed Jano's Garden. And I said, "Well, Michael, how did you do that?" And he said, "Can't never could." So I will tell you the rest of the story at the end of that so you don't go anywhere. So I have a lot to share with you today. I do want to mention that really, I'll encourage you not to take notes, because what I'm going to do after today, I will send Beth a PDF with the pertinent information that I'm going to share. So you don't have to take all kinds of, just sit back and have fun. But first, gardeners, wouldn't you agree that if you woke up in the morning and something didn't hurt, you think you were dead? So all winter long, I do squats. I'm just getting ready, because I know that when we hit the ground, it can be painful sometimes. So in my book, Late Bloomer, my publisher, said, "What are some of your credos?" And I think, and that was in 2016, but even as I get older, what really stands out for me is that I will only garden what I can comfortably tend. So it's really important, even when I go for new clients and they're doing designs, really one of the questions is, what can you comfortably tend? And I think that's really important. This is an exciting time of the season because we're all getting ready to get out there and plant and buy. And then I think it's also important to know that I will not concern myself with perfection. So when I first started gardening, I thought everything had to be perfect. And lo and behold, what I learned is that imperfect is perfect in the garden. So I am a lazy, cheap gardener, and you're going to see why in a bit. So we're going to talk about designing your gardens for sustainability, but how do we sustain the gardener so that we can keep doing this till we can't anymore? So just a couple things we're going to learn about designing today. We're going to learn about planting in odd numbers, functional bed lines, mass planting, welcoming entrances, inside, looking out, really important, winter interest, and my favorite, right plant, right place. So we'll talk first about planting in odd numbers. And planting in odd numbers is important. Do you know why? Who knows why we plant in odd numbers? It's a basic design principle, but can anyone tell us why we do odd numbers? We even do this in the hall. So anybody know why we do odd numbers? Well, here's why we do odd numbers. And always, even when I'm designing, I'm just so set on doing odd numbers. And here's why. If you were to plant two things, like let's just say we're planting two arborvitae, what happens is the eye absolutely separates those two. So you lose that impact. Anytime you're doing even or odd numbers, the eye doesn't do that. So it's something in our mental which we separate. And we don't want to do that. We want to have cohesive things that look like they're meant to be there together. So always, always do odd numbers. Oh, and let me just go back because, I don't want to go back. Well, I'll show you in this design. So here's the design. I just want to point out some things in this design for you to kind of think about if you're deciding to redesign gardens or start new gardens. But you'll see lots of times in there, what I'll do when I'm designing is I may do 4 plants in a row, and then the last one I might pop it forward or pop it back. I'm almost never lining things up unless we're hedging, like we're hedging boxwood. You know, we want to create a hedge. But what I often do is I'll take things and I zigzag them. I might come around with plants, form a little curve with plants. So when you're out there, you can create all kinds of different views of your gardens if you don't line everything up. I think back in the 70s, it may have been popular to line everything up like soldiers, but we don't really do that anymore. So think, when you do that shifting around with your plants, what you're actually creating is a 3-dimensional look in your garden. So your garden shouldn't only be enjoyable when you're standing in front of your house and you're looking at it. If you walk down the street from one angle, you'll see something different if you're moving things around. And the same with when you're coming this way. So always create that 3-dimensional look in your gardens. It's so pretty and it's so attractive. And you can kind of see in here, yes, sometimes we hedge things, but more often than not, we're mixing things up a little bit out there to create that 3-dimensional look. So here's just another one. So you can see how plants are laid out. And if you're laying your plants out, I never pop anything in the ground right away. I lay them out, I step back, I look, see if I like them. I'm forever shifting plants when I'm out there. And then when you're satisfied, then that's when you put them in the ground. So functional bed lines, so important, functional bed lines. Now, who would say this is a cute garden? Who says, yes, that's cute. There's no right or wrong. Cute garden, yes. Who says not so much? And why? Okay, why not so much? Okay, look forward. Okay. Oh, you know what? Yeah. And you know what? Typically people don't get that right away, but as we're talking, people are like, oh, and you're exactly right. This would not be considered a functional bed line. And here's why. Remember, we want to sustain the garden and the gardener. But can you imagine mowing in there? You probably have to take a scissors, because who can get along with it? So this would not be considered a functional bed line. Have you ever seen bed lines that go like this? And here's what happens. Your eye, remember that bed line is almost an outline to your garden. So you don't want people going like, dizzy following a bed line. We want big, swoopy bed lines. Not only are they more attractive, but they're easier to maintain. So imagine, even if you're not mowing, who's ever mowing your lawn, you want that transition around your garden beds to be very functional and easy. Let me show you some examples. So here would be a functional bed line. See how it's curvy? In fact, I was in Shelby presenting last weekend. I think I can't remember what road I was coming up, but there were new planting. And yes, this is exactly what they did with it. It's just not attractive. But notice how easy that is to maintain and how easy it is for your eyes to follow that garden. One thing I want to mention while we have this up is whenever you're designing, let's just say your walkways, what you always want to have happen is see how that bed line connects on both sides of the walkway. It's really important because remember, your eyes follow your bed. So sometimes you'll see the bed line comes up, it stops there, and then it starts somewhere down here. You want that to be continuous. Just draw a line right across that walkway. It's more appealing to the eye and it's more functional. Here's another one. See where the bed lines are meeting up on the walkway, and see how it's an absolute continuation of that garden bed. So really important part of the design process. And then you can see the bed lines are easy to maintain because they're big and swoopy. So Another one. Now, this doesn't look like it's as wide as it actually is, but it is. It's just the angle of the camera. But again, we have those beautiful bed lines are so important. And I think I show you a video or a picture of how we maintain these beautiful bed lines. So mass planting. Why do we mass plant? Anybody know why we mass plant? Impact. Impact, why is it impactful? Yes, that's exactly right. So have you ever looked at the garden? And I just want to disclose something. I'm going to share a lot of things with you, but when it's all said and done, they are your gardens, and you should do exactly what brings you joy. I'm just going to show you how I will design gardens and maintain gardens, but that's entirely up to you. But when we mass plant, we create that big impact in the garden. Have you ever looked at a garden where one plant's tall, one plant's short, you have all these different colors? Really, it becomes chaotic to the mind, to the brain. You can't even focus on everything because it's just kind of all over there. Let me show you mass plants. So see the beautiful peony in a mass plant and the hydrangea in the mass plant, how impactful that is. And if you notice some of the designs that I showed you earlier, we are always mass planting. It is a basic design principle. The only time we're not mass planting if you're doing a single specimen. So single specimens, yes. Yes, you may do two of one thing. Maybe you're doing columnar tree on this end of your home and you're pulling it back over to this end of your home. They're both single specimens, but they're far enough away that they're not going to create that division. Here's some more. I love this. I was actually in the fall, I was driving and saw this home and I just loved it. I loved how they raised that bed up for the boxwood. I thought it was a brilliant design and really pretty. But see the mass plant of those boxwoods, how lovely they are in the gardens. So here's just some more. These are new gardens that we put in. Know that when new gardens go in, yes, there's going to be space in between them. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. You need that space in between so plants can grow. So that's why new gardens aren't always as pleasing to the eye as they are later down the road when they mature and they fill out that garden bed. But here's just some more mass planting, same thing, so much more impactful. All right, so welcoming entrances. Now, I'm not showing this home because I want to shame anybody. We know that when life gets in the way, sometimes our gardens take a back seat. And I always ask, is this anyone's home? Because one of these days I just know someone's going to say, that's my home back there. But again, we're talking about sustaining the garden and the gardener. So know that when we do this, there's a couple things about this. So we put windows in to see out, yes. This would not be considered sustainable because if you are finding yourself all summer long shearing things down because the plant's too big for the spot, you're not sustaining the environment and you're certainly not sustaining yourself. So when we get into right plant, right place, I'm going to share with you all kinds of plans that if you just use the right plant, you can get rid of 1,000 headaches from gardening. It's not necessary to be doing all that shearing all the time. Oh, one more thing about this. Perhaps you'll consider that it's a security risk, because I know if I fell back there, my husband wouldn't find me till dinner time. So know that you don't ever want to pull up your house and have this seclusion by your door. Entrances should be welcoming, they should be inviting and not closed up like this one. So don't forget inside looking out. We're in the homes how many months out of the year? 6, 7. So when you're designing, if you're adding things new to your gardens this year, always give yourself a room with a view. So if you're standing at your sink, make sure you're looking out to something beautiful. If you're sitting in your favorite chair, again, make sure that you're giving yourself a room with a view. So winter interest, so important. Gardens should not be the forgotten land in the winter time. So winter interest is really important, but let me just say, this is not winter interest. So if someone has you wrapping and burlapping, that's not winter interest. If you have to do that, you have the wrong plant in the wrong place. And besides, who wants to look at this for 6 months out of the year, 7 months out of the year? So I'm showing you this house because I want you to see what a home looks like. This was in early spring, what a home looks like without winter interest. Pretty bleak, isn't it? I wouldn't want to look at that all winter either. But I want you to see the difference. Even the house, doesn't it just look incredibly different than it did before? And there's plenty of winter interest in here. We have boxwood, we have hydrangea, we have a service berry, there's ornamental grasses in there. The list goes on and on, all creating winter interest. So it's not always an evergreen either. So look at this beautiful. Isn't that just, I love this picture. This was a client's backyard and we were out there. I just had to take a picture of this because I just think it's incredibly gorgeous and very well designed. So here's just some more winter interest. Don't forget when you're designing, you must include winter interest. Bark, different branches, your red twig dogwoods. What else do we have up there? The hydrangea, never cut your hydrangea back. In fact, I never cut anything back in the fall because I am lazy and I am cheap. I never do any of that. Leave that for the wildlife, leave that for winter interest. Believe it or not, things decomposing underneath there are attributing to the health of your gardens. So here's just some more things for winter interest. See the boulder up there? Don't forget, it doesn't always have to be a plant. So I am forever putting boulders in designs. I will tell you, boulders are the only thing that are 100% maintenance free. So you just plop it down and walk away. There's no such thing as a maintenance free garden, but a boulder is maintenance free. So look at the other things. Look at the a bird bath swarm. I just love this because wildlife die mostly due to lack of water and not lack of food. So providing them water in the winter, plus you'll have so many birds come to your bird bath if you have a warm bird bath. So, and then down there is an outhouse, a screech owl. So I could tell you a whole other story about the screech owl movement, an owl movement that we did back in Royal Oak when I lived there, but that's for another time. But even that in the wintertime, so this is a winter picture, and you can see him sticking his little head out because he's trying to get warm from the sun, so precious. So my favorite thing to talk about, right plant, right place. So let's get started. Yeah, believe it or not, somebody actually did that. And somebody maintains it, which I think is even more incredible. That someone has the patience. They belong in Disneyland, really. That's for Disneyland. Here's some more. So we call it, it's not exactly wrong plant, wrong place. If you want to create screening, arborvitaes do work for that. But we talk about right plant, right place. You must read those plant labels. So these just look like stuffed sausage. Had they been maybe some of them eliminated, not so scrunched together and not popping out of the fence. So not necessarily wrong plant, just wrong placement. Yeah. So this is the most gorgeous rhododendrons I've ever seen in my life. And I would absolutely tear that house down before I would the rhododendrons. It's just incredibly beautiful. But notice how close they are to the home. We see that happen so many times that everything's up against the home. And if I don't have that little bit of the presentation in here, that little bit of information, remind me to share with you why that's so important. And I'll demonstrate that for you. So here's another. Now, arborvitae in the back, see them? But believe it or not, that they are covering up a picture window. So imagine opening your blinds every morning and looking at arborvitae. So yeah, they serve a purpose, but I wouldn't exactly want to look at them and imagine how dark it is in there. So here's another one. I don't know why we always push things up against the house. It's really important. I'm just going to address that now so I don't forget it in case I don't have a slide on it. But let's just give an example. Let's just say this is our big picture window, and we're going to plant things in front of it. So let's say that's probably about, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet tall. Let's say we're going to put in some beautiful, I don't know, 5 foot tall shrub, maybe a beautiful hydrangea. Here's what you must do, because this is probably the biggest mistake I see gardeners do all the time. So if this is our home here, there's our window. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to take out the tape measure. And I always tell people that one of the basic tools to have in your toolbox is a tape measure. So here's what you're going to do. You're getting ready to plant. You're going to take that tape measure and you're going to measure out 2 feet, 2.5, and if you're gutsy, 3 feet. Here's why. If we're planting, let's say a hydrangea that's going to get 4 feet wide, you're going to come out, let's just say 2 feet. Before you plant that, how much further are you going to come out before you put that plant in the ground? Plant 4 feet, we're saving 2. So we're out 2, we're going to plant something 4 feet. How much are we pulling that out? Another 2 feet. Yes. Yes, that exact. And oftentimes it takes a little bit of thinking, because here's what you're going to do. You're going to place that plant now 4 feet away from the house, right? And you're going to put it there and you're going to look back and you're going to say, that's crazy. But it's not crazy at all, because when that plant matures, it's going to go 2 feet on this side, 2 feet on that side, and you're still going to have that 2 feet that we allotted for maintenance. We call that the maintenance alley. It's really important. I don't know why people have this need to put everything against the home. It's really important. You can get back there with a ladder, you can walk back there, you can wash windows. So we call that the maintenance alley. And then also consider that when you're looking out, you should look out your windows and say, oh, look at my gardens down here. Pull your gardens out away from the home. Oftentimes, if you have a northern exposure, when you pull those out, because people think, oh, I have northern exposure, I can't have flowering things. Not true. Bring those gardens out where you're going to get the sun. So there's ways of avoiding. Northern gardens aren't a deterrent in the garden, and they shouldn't be at all. Let's see. So here again, we have, this is a burning bush. That burning bush are large shrubs, so careful when you plant them unless you want to shear them. But that is literally in a 2.5 foot wide space. So you can't put a shrub that gets 10, 12 feet wide in 2.5 feet. So it's really important to read those plant labels. Here's another one. I do mind this because those arborvitae are just blocking everything. So arborvitae have a place in the garden and it's not in front of our windows. So here's, I don't know why people just got to put those big evergreens right in front of their windows so they can't see out. So right plant, right place is really important. Now, this is a forsythia, and the reason I'm taking this picture is because this is what a forsythia looks like before it's sheared down into a ball or a box, or I don't know, a football. This is what a forsythia looks like in the spring for about 2 weeks. After that, it's just kind of a green shrub. But this is what happens when you put the right plant in the right place. You really get to see the beautiful structure of it. And then I included that little picture in the bottom, because oftentimes when we're thinking about controlling plants, it's always off the top of the plant. Remember, everything's at the base. So you're going to get yourself a 5-gallon bucket. You're going to sit on it. You're going to do your pruning at the base of the plant. If you're shearing off the top, you have the wrong plant in the wrong place. So that just kind of shows you how we thin out at the bottom, the before and the after. And it is all about the base. So we're going to talk about stand-up gardens. And yeah, don't do this. Don't try this at home. But we are going to talk about stand-up gardens. And what I mean by that is, as we get older, even if we're not older, who wants to be on their hands and knees out in the garden all the time? So there's many wonderful, small, ornamental shrubs that can take the place of maybe some of the smaller perennials that have you on your knees and not on your feet. Now, I love smaller perennials. In fact, hellebore is one of my favorites. But when I'm putting them in designs, I'm always considering what can the client comfortably tend, right? And then how much work do I want to do in the garden? And sometimes I'm using perennials really as maybe we'll say pillows on a sofa. So it's not a whole perennial garden because that's a lot of work. So let me share with you some of my favorite plants that I use stand-up gardens. In fact, I was at a client's house yesterday and we put her gardens in last year. And she said, can you just show me what to do in these gardens? And it was so simple because never once did she have to get on her knees. She doesn't want to be on her knees. So let me show you some of my favorite plants. Now, I love all plants, and there's so many beautiful ones, new ones every year. But before you head to the garden center, I really encourage you to have a plan in place. It's almost equivalent to when you go to the grocery store hungry, you buy things you don't need. When you go to the garden center, you buy things you don't need, right? So have a plan, always have a list. So remember, when you are designing, when you are going to welcome new plants to your garden, always think foliage first, flowers second, because flowers are fleeting in the garden. But the foliage, that's going to be with you the entire season. So if you look in this picture, you'll see that there's really nothing flowery, is there? But look at all the beautiful color, texture, I don't know what it's called, color, texture, interest, everything like that. So think always flowers first, foliage first, flowers second. So here's some of my favorites. I love 9-bar. So 9-bar, they come in fact, they're introducing a new one this year, but you go from tiny vine all the way up to Diablo. And there is a size for every garden bed. I love the little devil or the tiny ones because they're the shorter shrubs. What I love about them is that beautiful deep foliage. The larger ones like your Diablos, they also create winter interest because the bark will peel in the winter. So that's considered winter interest. Yes, they do get that little flower on it, which I love. It's fleeting, right? But that foliage is during the season and it's really lovely. And know that they are native to Michigan. So black lace elderberry, I love black lace elderberry. I really love it as a single specimen. So it's got that black cherry foliage. Yes, it gets the 10-inch pink flower, but I really love it for that beautiful foliage and that deep color in the garden. Really, again, native to Michigan. Oh, deer resistant, just for those that have deer. And so is are the 9-bar. So both are deer resistant. And this is a relatively new one. It's called laced up elderberry. And what I love about that is that it's almost grows like a tower. So if you have a small space and you want something tall, this laced up elderberry is very lovely. And again, deer resistant. And then, you know, I just love hydrangeas. I love hydrangeas. I'm not a big fan of the mop heads because unfortunately they're not reliable bloomers. If you have a mop head hydrangea that blooms, don't look at it, don't touch it, just leave it. Because oftentimes they'll bloom one season, then you won't see a bloom for another 5 seasons. So I love the panicle, I love the smooth leaf, I love the oak leaf hydrangea, many, many different varieties of these guys. So these are your limelight and little limes. And then there's your oak leaf. So again, the oak leaves come in many, they have, the munchkin and ruby slippers and peewee hydrangea. So the oak leaves come in many different sizes. I love a beautiful fall color. And again, the bark will peel in the winter, which gives you winter interest. Now I'm going to send you all these plants. So if you're writing them down, you don't have to. You're going to get them with the pictures and the names. And then there's the, the invincible wee well. So wee white. So these are 2 new hydrangeas and I've used them. They've probably been out for about 3 years. But here's what I love about it. They only get about 2 feet tall. So typically hydrangeas take a backstage in the garden. Well, they come in pink, which is called mini malbec, or wee white, and it's a smooth leaf. It's absolutely beautiful. So sometimes I'll use them almost like a ground cover because they're so, just imagine these little 2-foot shrubs with these beautiful blooms on it. Quite lovely. And so these, you should be able to find them in your garden centers, just really easy to maintain and really, really pretty. So here's Bobo hydrangea. Does anyone know Bobo yet? Love Bobo hydrangea. It's only about a 3-foot tall hydrangea. It's a panicle, really pretty. In the fall, it is going to turn like a dusty pink rose. And then again, we're leaving the spent blooms on all these for winter interest. And then incredible hydrangea. So the incredible hydrangea is the Annabelle hydrangea, except it doesn't flower. So incredible is beautiful. You're not going to get those that fall over and the branches will break on them because the flower head is too heavy. So really, really beautiful. And then invincible spirits. So if you like pink hydrangea, invincible spirits really pretty as well. Here's silk lime Wigelia, one of my favorite shrubs out there. It's not your typical Wigelia that tends to get spindly. So this is a very small mounded one, that deep color. Yes, it gets that pink trumpet flower, but beautiful. If you want to create a little hedge in front of the garden, beautiful for that. So really nice, easy. All these plants I'm showing you, you're not going to take those shears out and start forming them into balls or anything like that. Easy plants, put them in the right place. And then drift roses. Does anybody have drift roses? I love drift roses. So if you don't have them, you should consider adding some to your garden. Yes, they like the hot sun. They only get about 2 feet tall. They'll bloom from early spring right into the hard frost in the winter. Really pretty, little, easy to take care of roses. So this pugster butterfly bush, I found it, I think, a couple years in a garden center, and I saw this little shrub covered with butterflies. What is that? Well, this is pugster. It only gets about 2 feet tall. So if you like the butterfly bush, this is, and you don't want a big one, this one is ideal. They come in many different colors from white to dark pink. So really pretty and attracts the butterflies. And then dwarf fothergilla, I love dwarf fothergilla. It's probably considered a more medium-sized plant. So it only gets about 3.5 inches tall, native to Michigan. Yes, deer resistant as well. And what I love about it is it does get this honeysuckle bloom that smells really beautiful in the springtime. It has a pretty textured leaf and it creates really beautiful winter or fall interest. So you can see how the leaves are starting to turn in the fall. So if you're looking for something with a pretty fall interest, that has it. So that's itopene. So I love itopene, and here's what I love about it. So they don't flop over. They're a cross in between a tree peony and an old-fashioned peony. Absolutely gorgeous, 30 blooms a season, maintains its foliage, doesn't get the powdery mildew on them. Very expensive in the garden center, but I will give you a tip. Costco gets them every spring. So if you belong to Costco, I start hunting them down in Costco now, because you can get them there for, in a garden center, $80 last year, probably $150 this year, but in Costco, $33. So they fly off the shelf. So if you want itopenes for a bargain, start stocking your Costco, because they come and they go very quickly, but absolutely beautiful. Now, fine line buckthorn is another shrub. So if you like ornamental grasses, which I do like them, but I will caution you that they can become very difficult to maintain. But if you kind of like how they billow, that softness to them, I love the fine line buckthorn. Another plant that is not very wide, maybe 3 feet wide and about 7 feet tall. So if you have a tight spot, it's a very appropriate shrub for a tight spot. It's not evergreen, it is deciduous, but it has this lacy leaf on it. And if you do them in a mass plant, they're really gorgeous. When they're all building, they're very soft and lacy looking. Nice plant. Actually, here we put it in a container. At the end of the season, it went in the ground. So we used it as a centerpiece in these containers, and then later transplanted it into the ground. So don't forget, if you have a tight spot, your pyramidal or columnar trees are really, if you don't have a lot of space for a canopy tree, don't forget these trees, because they're really pretty. They also, well, let's see, I have ginkgo, they come in maples, oaks, also have seen them in the birch. So if you love a birch, but you don't have the room for a typical, the columnar trees are really, really pretty. So yes, we see a lot of plant sales, love plant sales, but remember, if it never hits the ground, it wasn't a deal, right? Often we see dead plants in containers from the year before that were a good deal, but never got planted. So when you are out, first of all, things to consider, which plant would you select? The one to the right or left? Right, and why right? More full or fuller? Yes, and see how it's much more dense than the other one? Not that the other one wouldn't do well, but remember, plants are very expensive. So when you're out there, make sure that you're getting healthy plants. Here's just some things you're going to want to look for in plants. And remember that if it's not a healthy plant, put it back on the shelf wait because they'll be getting new shipments in all the time. So don't settle for unhealthy plants. And these are, am I in your way? Okay. Just a little late, halfway through I'm asking, so I apologize, but just look at some of these things when you're out there shopping for plants. So have you ever had a plant where you couldn't get it out of the container? You should never have to take an axe to a root ball. So it's not, it's when you see it, it's definitely root bound, right? So don't settle for these kind of things. When you're in the garden center, you can give that container a little squeeze, let the air out of it, grab it by the root of the plant or by the base of the plant, pull up. If you can't get that plant out, it's probably root bound. If you see roots coming through the bottom, it's root bound. So put that back, wait, or find another one. So have you ever done this? You go to take your plant out of the container and half of it is soil. So typically it's not well rooted yet and you're buying a half container of soil, which leads me to another tip I want to share with you. When you're at the garden centers, we get plants in 2-gallon containers, 3-gallon, 5-gallon, 7-gallon. Oftentimes what you're doing is you're buying more soil. So make sure you check, go with the 2-gallon, save your money. If you're only buying one, buy 2 more. With that savings than from a 3-gallon, 5-gallon, or 7-gallon. Remember, landscapes are going to take 3 to 5 years to mature. So even if it looks a little bigger in that container, you're spending a lot more money if you just downsize and buy more. And this is what our root system should look like when we pull a plant out of a container. This is what a healthy root system looks like. So overgrown or lush, next question. Who says lush? Who says overgrown? Okay, so why do you say lush? It's full, right? We have full growth. So why we consider lush in the garden lovely? What? Yes, but what's another thing when we have full garden beds? What? No weeds. What else don't we have? What else do we have to do when we have full garden beds? You don't have to mulch. And isn't mulch expensive? Every year, imagine mulching. And what else? Someone said something else. What about, you don't have to water when you have full garden beds. You don't have to water like you do with garden beds that are scattered all over. And just keep in mind, nobody should ever look at your gardens and say, oh, her mulch is so lovely. So mulch is not, oh, I can't wait to show my mulch on, right? No, if you plant your gardens correctly, it's okay if plants just clutch ever so slightly. We never want to impede where one's dying out. That's overplanting. So it's really important when you're laying those plants out, you're reading those plant labels, you're giving them the space they need to mature, and then you're laying out the rest of your plant. But lush is lovely in the garden, so don't be afraid to fill those beds up. Here's another one. Isn't it just gorgeous? We take care of these gardens, and really the most maintenance in there is maintaining that beautiful bed line. So lush is lovely, fill up your beds. So leave the leaves, it's a must. Who leaves the leaves? Okay, who doesn't leave the leaves? Okay, I'm just so curious why you don't leave the leaves. Maybe, okay, so maybe when I'm done telling you why we should leave the leaves, you'll consider leaving the leaves. Now, I leave the leaves in the winter time. I'm going to show you why, all the reasons why we leave the leaves, but just consider that it is doing these sort of things to your garden beds. So it just, so many reasons to leave those leaves. The client's house I was at yesterday, yes, in spring we clean out our garden beds, absolutely. I'm not so, diligent that everything, every last leaf comes out of the garden, because I know that those leaves are just creating, they're decomposing, they're creating nutrients to our soil. It's all good when you leave those leaves. So while I was out at the client yesterday, she had a few leaves in there and it was windy yesterday. So I said, here's what I do. And I demonstrated. I said, I take my broom and I start sweeping out the leaves from my garden beds. And it's particularly helpful on a windy day because as you're sweeping, everything's blowing. to your neighbors because they don't even know they need your leaves. So leave the leaves in your garden beds. If you really want that rich soil that we call black gold, you're going to get that from leaving the leaves in your garden beds. So I never buy fertilizers. I never buy any of that stuff. I've always just left the leaves in my garden beds. And as a result, plants are lush, lovely, and happy. So I hope you will consider leaving those leaves in your garden beds. Now, remember, we're talking about sustaining the garden and the gardener. I have obsessive reading disorder. I love reading, thank goodness, because that's what I do. But I am a huge advocate that garden should be your love and not your labor of love. So if you're out there every day belaboring over that garden, not enjoying it, maybe you're going to rethink, what can I do this year? In fact, a lot of gardeners will say, by August, I'm done. And you shouldn't be done by August because we have three more months to enjoy our garden. So I'm going to share with you deadly sins in the garden. And I'm sure that you have at least one of these in your garden, at least one. So bindweed. It's not morning glory. There's nothing glorious about it. It's very, very invasive. How about Canadian thistle? Yeah, it's invasive. And then we have this plant. They sell this plant. Don't buy this plant. It's invasive. If you're not sure if this is the plant, pick it up and smell it. It will take over your entire garden bed. If that's what you want, you know, some of these ground covers cover ground, so be careful. I'll get calls like, oh, you know, my myrtle is covering the ground. Well, yes, it's a ground cover. So careful when you're picking these things out. And then bishop's weed, the beautiful variegated or non-variegated. And then lastly, grass. I think this is number 7. Lastly, grass. Now, here's what they all have in common. They all grow with rhizomes. So rhizomes meaning they're going to go this way, they're going to travel that way, and not downward. And the more you pull these, if you've been trying to get rid of them, the more you pull them, the more you're just going to invigorate. Because you know when we're pruning, we're actually invigorating that shrub to more, if you're pruning to dense up, right, to be fuller. Same things with these guys. So they share those rhizomes. Now, we do a process. We've been doing this since the inception. This is my 16th year. I did this even before I started my business. It's called solarizing, and it's nothing we thought of. So farmers have been doing this forever. And solarization, the easiest way to explain it is if we all put a plastic bag over our heads, what would happen? Die. We're going to die, right? Because we're not getting air, right? For plants, when we solarize them, which we're actually smothering them, they're not getting air, they're not getting water, they're not getting sunlight, they're not getting the types of things that they need to survive. So we call it solarizing. We use it all the time. Let me just show you some pictures. So this is a property that I did a design for, and the client thought that she was going to be able to plant these plants right away. But unfortunately, she had invasive weeds in it. Now, just a couple of things. You cannot put the plastic over woody shrubs. So know that if you put the plastic over a shrub, it's not going to decompose it. So just a disclaimer there, don't try that with woody shrubs. But here's what we did. We laid the plastic down. There were a couple of old shrubs in there we tore out, but everything else, if you have invasives or if you have a ground cover you want to smother out, don't start digging. Remember, we're lazy. We don't want to work that hard. Work smart, not hard. You simply lay the plastic down like you see in the picture, right over everything. And then you're going to secure those ends so that the wind doesn't blow it up. Know that anytime there might be a little air pocket in the side. Know that these invasives with rhizomes are going to try to find where it's going to get air, water, sun. So they're going to still travel a little bit. Most of it's going to end up decomposing and smothering out anyway. But if that happens, if you see that something, whatever that invasive, come out from under the plastic, you're just simply going to clip with your scissors. You're going to keep depriving it of what it needs to survive. Now, I like plant exchanges. I think plant exchanges are a really great thing to share what we have. But I would caution you that when you do take someone else's plant, before you put it in your garden, you just simply bare root it. So that if they have one of these problems that they may not even know of, thistle or bindweed that goes deep into the soil, you're not bringing that into your garden. So it's really important. Take the plant, take it home, get it ready to plant, bare root it. You're weeding anything that might be in that root system, then you plant it, knowing that you're not going to transfer something. So this is how we do it. Very simple, very easy. The next question is how long does it take? Well, it depends on your area. If it's a very sunny spot, it's going to heat up quicker and start decomposing faster as opposed to a shaded area. So it just depends. Put it down 2 months. If you have an invasive, plan on keeping it all summer long. I would. If you have bindweed, if you have bishop's weed, any of these, plan on having that plastic out there all summer long. Now, if it's in a visible spot, I'll show you what we do if it's in a visible spot. This happens to be where nobody could see it but her from her home, because her whole property was covered up with arborvitae, so nobody's going to notice it. So we elected not to lay down the mulch to cover it up. But this is the only way I will tell you you will get rid of these invasive plants. Let me just show you another example. So this is a client whose garden got away from her, had a lot of invasive. This is what we did next. And everything under there was solarized. So you go back and you think it might be time, you want to check on it. You lift up the plastic on it, and if it's still growing, cover it up and go pour yourself your favorite drink. Because there is no other way you will get rid of this stuff. And the solarizing is easy. It's not back-breaking. I highly recommend it. You do it all the time. Any questions on solarizing? Very easy process. Yes, ma'am. Great question. So I like a thicker plastic. You can use an old tarp if you have it, because you don't want anything real thin that, you know, you want a nice weight to it instead of just a flimsy plastic. But very good question. Any other questions? Yes. Another great question. Everything is decomposed, and we know that. Here's what I want to warn you about: things like, let's say, bindweed. So we take care of this really beautiful golf course. And one season, we had a bed full of bindweed. So I told them about the solarizing, but the guys thought that if they came in and scooped out all the soil, so they went down about 3 feet, filled it back up with good soil, that we could conquer the bindweed problem. I will tell you, at the end of the summer, guess what was still there? Bindweed. So how long does it take? However long it takes. You'll see that everything is dead, decomposed, smothered. You can also do this on grass. So you just have to be patient with it. If you're in a shaded area, it's going to take longer. So if you have an invasive now, I would consider all summer long. And then you can see how you can camouflage it, because there's no other way you're going to get rid of it. Here's a client's home where she had thistle. Now, if it were my home, I would not have salvaged the deer-eaten hosta or kind of the stomped on fern. I would have ran that plastic right across the whole garden bed. But we did it piecemeal. When you do something like this, that thistle, we did see it. It's going to come up by the base of the plant that you leave in, right? Because that's an air pocket. It's going to find that. Remember, when you're laying your plastic, overlap it. So you don't leave any space in between. Don't bud it up, overlap it. But a couple years later, because then we did put mulch on it, we did get rid of the thistle. So it's very hard. You know, if you have thistle, it's almost impossible to get rid of, especially without using chemicals. Yes. Oh, questions? Oh, sure. So the questions were about solarizing, and the question was, okay, don't go back. Okay, we won't go back, but the plastic really works. You know, you can Google this process, and it's out there. You can see why we do this and how it works. Yes, question in the back. Yeah, great question. So the question was, can you get this plastic at Home Depot? Absolutely. In the paint department, you'll find it. You can get it in big rolls if you have a bigger area. So yes, again, a tarp will work. An old tablecloth would work, a plastic tablecloth, flip it over. I've actually used carpet, flip the carpet over, And then remember, this is not meant to stay there. So this is not what I'm going to show you next. It's not meant to stay there. It's just meant to smother out, lift it up so that you can plant again. Now, natural weed barrier does anybody use cardboard in their gardens? Yay, pinch yourselves. That's excellent. Now, I love Costco cardboard. So if you go to Costco cardboard, that's why that pallet there, the pictures there, see that plastic on that pallet? That is the best plastic. It's a cardboard. It's not too thick. It's not too thin. It's just right. It's very easy to work with. I don't like working with newspaper. Very easy. If you're going to cut around your plant, easy to cut around. Now is a great time to lay cardboard before you mulch. Everything's going to decompose. You will not weed all summer long, but you cannot use this cardboard on invasives. You absolutely cannot. You must use the plastic. These are just for typical garden weeds that pop up. Do it now. Don't weed all summer long. Put your mulch on top of it and just have fun, because it will actually smother out the weeds. As it's decomposing, it's adding nutrients. So do your cardboard now. That's not to say if there's a refrigerator box on a curb somewhere, grab it, because when you open that up, it covers a big area. So cardboard, Costco, you can see how we're doing it there. You just lay it over the weeds. Don't weed. That's too hard. Lay the cardboard down, lay your mulch, and you're done. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes. Well, the question is about printed cardboard that maybe you get something, it's shiny. I will tell you, they all work. They're all going to break down. They're all going to decompose. Some of those are going to take longer, which is not a bad thing. But I just love the Costco cardboard because that kind of cardboard is hard to cut if you're cutting around your bed. So I love the Costco cardboard, and it's free. And you don't have to be a member. Just go in there and take it. And I tell everybody, so go get your spring cardboard. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I don't think we need to say anything about this, but know that this happens and we see it all the time. So share with a friend that you should do that in case they don't know. Now, I'm going to give you organic remedies in the garden. I said I never use fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides. I'll send these to you so you don't have to write them down. So you'll get all these. And some work, yes. Some maybe when I show you about the deer is debatable, but remember that we do have many, many deer resistant plants. So this is for lawn. This is white clover. Now I lived in Royal Oak, and we lived on, you know how we have small properties in Royal Oak, had all gardens, no grass. The easiest to maintain, unbelievably beautiful, lush, lovely. Then we moved a mile and a half up the road and got a home in Clawson, and we had a ½ acre of all grass and very little gardens. Now, I don't use fertilizer, so I spread white clover in my lawn. I don't know how happy my neighbors are about it, but this is all the benefits that white clover, many of us who are maybe up there in age, remember we grew up with white clover, right? It was all over the gardens. And somewhere in the 70s, there became this big movement, multi-trillion-dollar movement about fertilizing our lawns. And now we know the impact of that on our lawns when we use fertilizer. So we're seeing more and more where people aren't fertilizing their lawns. That's why I just have to comment on native plants, because if you're going to introduce all these native plants in your gardens and you're going to put fertilizers on your grass, you're inviting the wildlife in, and once they get there, they have to deal with the fertilizers, the herbicides. So careful when we do that, and know that you can't do one and not the other. Anytime they put a sign in your lawn that says keep women, children, and pets off the lawn, you know it can't be good. So I love white clover. It's all over my lawn. Same with the dandelions, but whatever. Yes. Well, I like Milorganite. So that's very good for your lawn. You're not going to harm anything. If you just let your grass grow long, like about 4 inches, you're going to help choke out those weeds. You're going to do less watering on your lawn. And certainly you're going to serve the environment. I think as gardeners, our roles are changing. So it's not so much pretty plants, although we can have very pretty plants in our gardens, but it's really about the complete circle and protecting the wildlife, protecting the environment, and having beautiful plants. I will tell you, you can have it all. You really can. So this is all the things that are so great about that white clover. I know my one neighbor who uses, he's just like, oh, here she is with her white clover. So here's for rabbits, and I'm going to send these to you, so you don't have to mark, you don't have to write any of it down. Slugs, snails, Japanese beetles, spray, for roses. You'll get all these. Here's the one that's just so debatable, but you know what? There's many deer-resistant plants. Yes, if they're hungry, they'll eat anything. But if you have deer, you know, sometimes I'm just like, let them eat, because we inherited deer when we got a half acre. And you know, that yes, they do eat some things, but they're hungry too. So we love the deer. Every time they're back there, my husband and I are like, deer, like we've never seen a deer before. It's like, we just love them so much. So here's for your tomato plants this year, you might consider eggshells and coffee grounds. Okay, secrets in the garden. I'm just going to quickly share with some secrets that we use out in the garden that may make your work easier. So pink bucket challenge. I like to share about the pink bucket challenge because sometimes we feel like we have to tackle all the gardens all at once, and you don't have to do that. So maybe perhaps you take a bucket and you walk around your gardens, you weed till that bucket's full, and then just be done with it. And they're going to be there tomorrow. Oftentimes we get so overwhelmed because we want to conquer everything at once. And it's never doable, and people get disappointed. So fill the bucket up, go sit down, and know that you'll be out there again tomorrow, because weeds, unfortunately, if you don't have lush gardens, they're going to be there all summer long. So just don't stress yourself out about it. That's not what gardens are for. Landscape fabric, never, never, never use it. If we want a natural weed barrier, what are we going to use? Cardboard from where? Costco. It's free. Go get it. So here's the problem. Weeds grow under it, weeds grow on top of it. We're constantly ripping it out. If we want a natural weed barrier, we're using the cardboard. So this is a great little tool, and get yourself one. It's called a 5-in-1. You can get it in the paint department. We have renamed it to the 7-in-1 because we use this little $5.98 tool. It's perfect for getting weeds out in between cracks, the sidewalk, the driveway, pavers. While you're down there getting those cracks out, you can flip it on the flathead, and you can also scrape off if you have moss you don't want there. So it's a great little cheap tool. We all have one in our tool belt. So maybe you'll consider getting one. So this is about the bed edging. You must keep that grass out of your beds. And this is the way to do it. If you have a natural bed edge, we call this a natural bed edge. This is your bed line. That's a half moon spade. Get yourself a half moon spade. Create that trench in between your garden beds and your grass. That'll help keep that grass out of your garden. Once that grass starts spreading into your garden beds, you are in trouble. You are going to have to solarize your garden. Grass is so invasive. So make sure that you're trenching down, do it twice a year. Now's a good time to do it, and do it again in fall. And not only does it help with that, but it looks so beautiful in your gardens. That's me. If you have big piles of stuff, and you know, we live in the city, things have to be tied up. If you have big piles, if you get down there and start rolling, you'll be surprised how easy it is to roll and then tie after that. Instead of trying to wrestle with a big pile, just roll it up. It's easy to tie. So, oops. Oh, how do I put that? Oh, there we go. So I'm showing you this picture because I'm much stronger on my knees than I am on my feet. So anytime I'm digging, I'm using this little shovel, and most of my strength is in my arms. So it works really well if you're digging holes. It's just this tiny little shovel, and I love it. So here's unusual things to compost in case you didn't know. If we have any composters, some of my favorites by far are nail clippings, because little did you know you can clip your nails over your compost bin. That includes toenails, family day, family night, block party, everyone to the compost bin. So yeah, so many things that you may not have known you can compost. And then recycle, reuse, upcycle, all that stuff. I'm just going to show you some fun photos. remember, if you can poke holes in it and soil, you can grow something in it. Now, this has good drainage, so you don't have to worry about that. But just some fun pictures, bud pan, chandelier, pull this stuff out of the garbage. We do it all the time. Just more fun things, filing cabinet, old bird bath, I think a beautiful patio table. This is a headboard that the homeowner displayed as her address. So she got some numbers. That's kind of quirky. So this is actually wheelbarrows. I took this picture when we visited P.L. Smith's farm in Arkansas. It was so wonderful. He invited many garden bloggers. It was such a great event. And I will tell you, he is just as genuine in person as he is on television. So these were his portable veggie gardens. And so if you don't have shade and you think I can't grow veggies, well, you cannot. Just roll them out to the sun and roll them back at night. So those are mobile veggie gardens. Love this. I love it. Yeah, you have to mow that, but how fun to be able to do that in your backyard. And then these are strawberries and gutters. So you may have seen these where you can hang the gutters and then grow strawberries in them. Plates, old plates, pick them up at the thrift store. And yeah, these things may only last a season or two, but it sure is fun while you're doing it. So what's hot? These are a couple things that are what's hot. Not a lot has changed, but I'll tell you what hot is on demand and increases that we be more friendly, better stewards while we're out there gardening. So this is the 2022 color of the year. I think it's beautiful. Those hydrangea were when I was in Scotland. I think fabulous. With our mop heads, I don't think we quite get these kind of colors in Michigan, in the South and in the East, but so that is the color for this year. So rest of the story, I told you Michael came over in 2005 with the boulder. In 2006, in February, he was returning luggage. He was on a fishing trip with his buddies. And he came over and he and I were talking and he said, Jano, let's start a business. And I had this great corporate job in an office with no windows. I just had to throw that in there. But I said to him, well, Michael, it's not a good time. I have this really good job. It's not a good time for me. So that's February 2006. The next month, March 2006, Michael, who's 49 years old, died of a massive heart attack. So the following month, in April 2006, I started my business planning strategy to exit corporate America. And I am celebrating my 16th year as Two Women in a Hoe. And it was not always easy when I first started because ignorance isn't bliss, it's chaotic. But after a while, I got the gist of how this all worked. And I always remember what Michael said, can't, never could. So play in the garden, because life is too short, we have to clean fingernails. And with that, if you're not on our Facebook page, we have 590-some thousand fans on our Facebook page. We'd love for you to join us. If you like what I shared today, you can leave a review on greatgardenspeakers.com. This is a website where you can get speakers from all over the nation, and especially with doing Zoom, so you don't have to just resort to Michigan. And then that's my book, Late Bloomer, How to Garden with Comfort, Ease, and Simplicity. Welcome, good reviews are welcome. Same with greatgardenspeakers.com, because you can leave a review. And with that, may all your gardens grow. And if we have any more questions, I'm happy to answer. Any other question? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that was the story. Michael died. Yeah. That was kind of the end of the story is Michael died. And yeah. Yes, ma'am. No. Her question is a leaf. What was it called? Leaf key. Yes. So it, oh. Yes. So yes, I did. And you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because last year I noticed that on my Incredible where the leaves were closed up, and someone online said, "Well, separate them." So I thought I'm going to give it a try. Don't do it. I destroyed. I mean, my leaves. So typically, I don't mean to sound insubordinate, but I don't really pay attention to a lot of those things. Because I just don't. I just let nature do its thing. If there's a problem in the garden, a continual problem, I will remove that. plant and put something in that isn't a problem. Like, you know, your sand cherry plants, they get Japanese beetles. So when I first started gardening, I spent every morning knocking off Japanese beetles into soapy water. I thought this is just ridiculous. Finally, I ripped them out and put it in my garden. So I don't really, you know, I just think we're gonna have successes and we're gonna have failures. But when I opened those hydrangeas up, all my weeds were just, and it was from opening them. It wasn't from, so I don't recommend doing that. Yeah, the Incredible, which is the Annabelle, yes, but my leaves were all pregnant, but that's odd. I won't bother with it this year. You know, we don't know yet, but I would not do that again. That was just my experience. Good question though. Anyone else have any questions? Is there some online? I think it was showing some there earlier. Good question. Oh, that's me. Yeah. Okay, so if there's no questions, thank you so much for having me and have a wonderful season. May 30th, join us now. May 20th. May what? 20th. May 20th. Yeah. May 20th.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I'm glad you liked it. I'm gonna get out of your hair.
No, you're fine.
They're gonna go eat again. Here, I'll just pull this over here.